What's up everyone, my name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I'm going to teach you a little bit of mixing through one of the best mixing tips that I have ever heard. So a while back, I was actually taking classes in an audio institute, and they had a bunch of people come in and talk about like a bunch of different things, and a producer came in to talk a little bit about mixing tracks. And he was a hip hop producer, he recorded artists, he put their, vocals on different beats, he produced his own beats, stuff like that. And what he was talking about was specifically talking about the vocals on top of, say, a hip hop beat. But you can take this tip that he gave me and apply it to pretty much all kinds of mixing in a lot of different ways. And this tip sort of sums up a lot about what mixing is. So you may have heard tips like this before in the past. I just want to sum it up and give you everything right here in this video because it really helped me when it came to mixing all my tracks together. Now I have this little basic sort of track. It's just the beginning, just an idea of a track. Like there are no drums with it. This is just a vocal track. We have some piano, we have a little arp, and then a bass line under it. I just wanted to focus on those elements because they're going to be the best to sort of teach you what this is. And you can hear how it sounds right now. I'm just going to play halfway.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets.
So it sounds very nice. It sounds very pretty. You have some good music going there. Like just the music itself is good, but the mixing, even though it sounds very smooth, is really not good. And I'm going to sort of be fixing it up today using this tip. And you may have heard this tip in the forms of, having things sitting in the mix. That's a really just bare bones way of summing it up, or maybe letting the instruments breathe. Those are expressions used a lot when people are relaying this kind of technique. But basically, it is taking away from sounds in order to fit other sounds in the mix. And not just taking away, you have to highlight the specific frequency range and, have a little conversation with yourself about whether that sound should be there, if it should be moved, or maybe it needs to be just louder or softer, and sort of let the instruments sort of talk it out and figure out where each one wants to be. Now, obviously, when we're making tracks, or at least when I'm making tracks, I like to sort of center things around the vocal, and you want to make the track center around the vocal. You don't want to change the vocal to fit the track most of the time. If the vocal is the main focus, you want everything else to be built around it. So we can just take a look at this vocal right here.
Can I be your star tonight?
There is a little bit of processing. I have some sort of dimension things going on here with delay and reverb, a little bit of saturation and compression with the sound goodizer, just a little bit, limiting, and then a transient processor just to take out some of the harsh like clicks and pops. But there's no real EQing done on this. So let me add an EQ at the very end here. So here's our EQ. Let me make this bigger and let's see what's going on here.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
All right, so the fundamental is constantly sitting kind of in this range. I'd say between the 200 and 300 hertz range, or where the fundamental is constantly sitting. Now, the first thing you'd want to do with a vocal like this is obviously to cut the low end.
Can I be your star tonight?
So really everyone has already been using this tip, at least everyone who cuts the low end of these kind of things, because you don't want the low end messing up like the bass and the kick drum and anything else that should be sitting in the low end. You don't want them bleeding and meshing together. You want to give them space to breathe. So we're going to cut it out and just do like a normal high pass.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
I'm going to stop at around 150 right there, because just right in this range is where the fundamental is. There's no need to have stuff below that. But we want to make sure that this range is very important, this part right here.
Can I be your star tonight?
And right here as well.
Can I be your star tonight?
Because this is where a lot of the meat of the vocal is sitting. If I were to cut all that out,
Can I be your star tonight?
now it sounds like she's coming through a telephone. It's absolutely no good. You really don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that these frequencies stick out fairly well in the mix. So now let's take this piano, which is too quiet. The most basic part about mixing is literally just making things, match in volume. So I'm just going to pull up a limiter and give it a little bit of volume so we can control it just with the fader. But now let's find this range in here. Once again, let's make this EQ bigger. A lot of this has to do with the EQing, but we're just letting the sounds breathe. So let's find this range. It's right in here. That's where the vocal is also sitting very strongly. So there are two ways you can do this. You can first of all just take down the EQ. Not too much because this piano isn't very deep. Or you could find a multi-band compressor where you could highlight this region and sort of add some compression right here to bring the level down. But we just really want to make sure they breathe. And what I'm going to tell you right now is essentially the tip that he originally gave us, because he was talking about the hip hop vocals over the hip hop beats. What he did was when he had a hip hop beat and he needed the vocal to stick out a little more, he'd take a little bit out from the 1K to the 4K range. So about here, say around 1K, we can do a little dip, and then maybe around 4K as well. He was talking about all in there, but I'm just going to take down a little bit right there because that's where a lot of the pronunciation and consonants of the vocal actually sit. Like that's where you can really tell what the vocal is saying. If you just highlighted the low, then it'd be very hard to hear what they were saying. If you just highlighted the very high, then it'd be hard to hear what they're saying. But if you had a little scoop right here, that would probably be the easiest spot to tell what somebody's actually saying. So if you take a little bit out there, it can make your vocals a little bit clearer if you take this away from other things. Now, I would say the piano objectively sounds worse. Now, if you're listening to just the piano sounds worse. And the point of all this is to make some sounds sound worse for the sake of making all of the sounds sound good together. That may sound counterproductive, but this is what I'm talking about when you want to make sure that you have all your instruments breathing and sort of flowing together. They all have their own space in the mix where the vocal can sit here, here, and here. These are the three areas in which the vocal sits the most. And when you have things that generally have the same shape and frequency range on the spectrum as the vocal, kind of like a piano, they have similar frequency ranges. You want to make sure you take out the one that you don't want to be the forefront, and not completely take it out, just duck it down and give the vocal those little spaces to breathe. And obviously cut the sub to clean it up a little bit. And now that we've taken out a little bit there, I actually do want to add a little bit of high end. Now there's not much high end in this piano, but I like to sort of contour it. When I take out a little bit here, I like to add a little bit somewhere else to sort of increase the contour. So now we can match the levels together.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no.
Now we can hear very clearly the piano and very clearly the vocal. They're each breathing and sort of acting separate on their own, but neither of them is really fighting for attention in the mix. I'm not constantly switching back and forth. Before, it was hard for me to kind of hear the piano because first of all, it was too quiet, and secondly, it was just living right around those frequency ranges that the vocal was, so it was clashing.
Can I be your star tonight?
So that's essentially what we're doing, just carving out those spots to fit everything in. But it's not just about carving out the spots. Take this right here. If I play this with the vocal.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
What I'm hearing, what's going on, is that there is a lot of action right here, kind of starting especially at the 1K area, 1 to 2K area. Let's see, here's the 1K area, it's the 2K area.
Can I be your star tonight?
That top octave doesn't really mix with the vocals very well. Now, one thing you could do is just straight up take them down, like we were doing for the last one.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day.
And it doesn't sound bad, but to me, it still feels like they're just fighting for attention a little bit. They don't go as smoothly together as the piano and the vocals were doing just then. Yeah, we haven't even brought the piano into this one. But what I am doing instead is that I'm not just EQing it out. what I want to do is I want to highlight all of this, and I want to actually take it down an entire octave, because I just didn't like that top octave part. The part in the middle sounded all right. It sort of mixed together. It was low enough that it didn't clash with the vocal. So now we have that same ARP an octave lower. And it still serves its purpose. It's subtle, it's kind of glittery, it sounds very nice. And now we can bring back the vocal.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
Now that mixes a little bit better. First thing we have to do is we have to make sure with all our things that are not the sub bass or the kick, we have to make sure to cut the sub.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul.
That'll be fine. But now we have it in a much better place to where the vocals and that ARP sort of mix together a little better. But once again, we can take that spot in here. So it was around 200 to 300 hertz, like we said before, for the fundamental. And we can just dip that down a little bit.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
Now it's very clear that now we gave the vocal space, so that ARP is now very clearly backing up the vocal and not trying to fight for attention. Let's bring in the piano and see how it sounds all together.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets.
And that's when you have everything kind of together. Now you can balance out the levels of everything a little bit easier, because even if the ARP and the vocal sound good in one spot, bringing the piano, I saw the piano was kind of falling background to the ARP. So I had to maybe bump up the piano a little bit and turn the ARP down a little bit just to give them all sort of flatter, just room to breathe in the mix. You know what I'm saying? You have to bring them up to a level at which they are audible. And now the last part, we're bringing in some bass. We can see we have the sub bass going on, and then we have a little bit of things going on in here in this low mid range, but it's mostly just a sub. And now with this, it should be very easy because there's nothing else sitting in the sub region, and there really is no other frequencies that are interacting weirdly with the piano or the ARP or the vocal, but it's not completely done. Let's take a listen to all of it together.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets.
Now let's think about it. There's nothing going on in the low end. It's at a pretty similar level to that ARP. And, you know, it has no other frequencies that are interfering with everything else. Why does a sub sound like it's kind of getting drowned out by everything else? Well, that's mainly due to a gap in the mix. Now, if we look at this total mix just all together on an EQ, you can maybe spot the gap that I'm talking about.
Can I be your star tonight?
See right in here.
Fill my soul with light the day we met.
Through all the rest of the track, pretty much from here on upward, there's kind of an even distribution of where the harmonics are. Maybe a little less in the low end. Those might be taken up by drums later. But there's a consistent bass and everything else is consistent, except for this gap right here.
Can I be your star tonight?
There's nothing going on, and that adds an odd sort of separation from the sub and the rest of the track. It doesn't work out very well. Something has to take up that space. So this is almost the reverse of the tip that I was given before, where everything has to breathe. You have to make sure that if there is room for something to breathe, something needs to be there to fill in that space most of the time. It's not a universal thing. But in this situation, I'm going to sort of use the reverse, and I'm going to bring in more frequencies through this sound or with another sound. In this situation, this is a Serum preset, and this preset allows us to sort of bring up the cutoff. So now we have a little more grittiness in there. We can hear some other things coming up. Some other harmonics are present now. And now at least we can work with it. It might not mix in very great just from the start.
Can I be your star tonight?
it interferes a little bit, but now there's something there for us to work with. So something is in that space now, and now we can use the tips that I've already gone over to sort of shape it to work with everything else.
Can I be your star tonight?
Now, I've already talked about sort of making sure that we can take out a little bit right here so it doesn't mess with the vocal.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
So I'm going to take it right there, and then let's just boost a little bit of the frequencies here.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no.
Now that did not completely eliminate the gap, but at least it put something there for us to work with, and now it sounds a little bit smoother.
Can I be your star tonight?
Before there was absolutely nothing there. And you could maybe add a little bit more in there. Don't go too heavy on that sort of muddy range of the bass. Just make sure that there is something there that you can work with.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met.
So now that we're done doing this little mixing session that we did with these samples, first off, I'm going to play you the thing that I played in the beginning that was sort of unmixed and didn't work out very well. And then afterward, I'm going to play you the entirety of what we got right here.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. I hope you'll still want me. I hope you'll still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground.
Now on the Ghost Hack YouTube channel, I actually made a short little track using that specific acapella and that chord progression. It's right here, building a track behind an acapella. If you are curious as to, the finished result of that, you want to see how that's done, you can just go to the Ghost Hack YouTube channel and it'll be right here. But concerning mixing, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.